Welcome back. There's good news for President Obama in a new Gallup poll. After 3 days of RNC attacks, the president's approval rating stood at 43%. But during the DNC, it spiked to 52%. That's a 9-point jump in just a week. The president is now at his highest approval since May of 2011, the death of Osama bin Laden. With exactly 60 days until the election, the president is more popular than he's been in 16 months. Today, he was looking to build this momentum on the road with Vice President Biden, delivering his message to voters.
I refuse to ask middle-class families to give up their deductions for owning a home or raising kids just to pay for another millionaire's tax cut. I refuse to ask students to pay more for college or kick children out of Head Start programs or eliminate health insurance for millions of Americans who are poor or elderly or disabled. Also, folks like me and Mr. Romney can pay less.
The president also says his opponents have just one idea, and they think it works for everything.
Tax cuts when times are good, tax cuts when times are bad. Tax cuts to help you lose a few extra pounds. Tax cuts to improve your love life. It'll cure anything, according to them.
He also gave a shout-out to some of his biggest supporters at the DNC this week.
Michelle was amazing. President Clinton made the case in the way only he can. Somebody emailed me after his speech. They said, you need to appoint him Secretary of Explaining Stuff.
60 days to the election, 26 days to the first debate. President Obama is emerging from his convention with a spring in his step and a bounce in the polls. Joining me now is Patricia Murphy, editor of Citizen Jane Politics, and Dana Milbank, columnist for the Washington Post. Thank you both for joining me.
Hi, Reverend.
Thank you.
Dana, the president now has sharpened his image to take all the way to Election Day. What do you think?
Well, look, this is exactly the sort of position he wants to be in after Labor Day. Now, we want to be careful with any one poll because these polls can bounce around a lot. But if this Gallup result is confirmed in other polls next week, he's going to be in quite a formidable position going into the election, which is a huge surprise given where the economy is and given the attacks he sustained. We had not a terrific employment report today. But if he's getting the bounce that it initially appears he's getting after Romney got no bounce at his convention, and he's got what seems to be a message that's resonating, he's going to be in a very good position.
All right, so Patricia, if the bounce is reflected in other polls, and when you look at the fact that nearly 53,000 tweets in a minute after his speech, which set a record, meaning people were watching and responding, if all of this proves to be so, he's in a formidable position, Dana Milbank says.
Well, I obviously totally agree with that. And you have to really give the Democrats credit for using every speech of their convention on every night of their convention was focused on selling Barack Obama. And there has been a lot of dissent within Democratic ranks, a lot of members of Congress grousing about what he did do, what he didn't do, interest groups in the past grousing what he did do, what he didn't do, what he didn't live up to. But then when you saw this convention, there was absolutely none of that. Every Democrat was on the same page. We believe in Barack Obama. We're proud of his record. We're here to tell you to vote for him because we're going to vote for him again and support him every step of the way. The Republicans had no such thing. The keynote address by Chris Christie barely mentioned Mitt Romney. Very few people talked about Mitt Romney. So I think that the Democrats, if this bounce is real, the Democrats really get a lot of credit for staging it and directing it completely toward their nominee and getting him reelected.
Well, to substantiate Patricia's point, Dana, in the Republican convention, there was 213 mentions of Romney during the whole RNC convention. In the Democratic convention, there was 686 mentions of President Obama. But let's get down to the electoral stuff. there seems to be a shrinking electoral map for Mr. Romney. Romney has launched a new ad campaign in 8 battleground states: Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, and Virginia. But he's not advertising in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Now, coming out of the convention, is Romney's path to victory more narrow than before, and must he win Ohio to win this, Dana?
Well, Reverend, it was always fairly narrow because we tend to look at this in a horse race sense of national polls. And when you looked at the battleground polls, it was already going to be a more difficult path for Romney. And it appears the last couple of weeks have made that more difficult still. Now, you may see a state that he appears to be pulling out of, then pushes into somewhere else, and you see Obama going into a place like Georgia, where you wouldn't expect Democrats to be spending any money at all. There are any number of things that can pivot between now and Election Day, and I don't think you want to say it's all about Ohio, but clearly the way you arrange these building blocks for Romney, he has fewer possibilities right now than he did a couple of weeks ago.
Now, Patricia, one of the things that we saw strong in the president's speech last night was foreign policy, and there were a lot of people critical, including myself, of Mr. Romney, who didn't even mention Afghanistan in his speech. And he was on Fox today explaining why he didn't mention the war in Afghanistan in his acceptance speech. Watch this.
They were essentially saying that you don't care about the U.S. military because you didn't mention U.S. troops and the war in Afghanistan in your nomination acceptance speech. Do you regret opening up this line of attack, now a recurring attack, by leaving out that issue in the speech?
I only regret you repeating it day in and day out.
Well, I mean, we just came from Charlotte.
When you give a speech, you don't go through a laundry list. You talk about the things that you think are important.
Things that you think are important? Is he saying that Afghanistan and the troops being there is not important?
Well, if you listen to that answer, that is really exactly what he said. I think it's not important to him electorally. I think he's got a lot of data coming in from polls that this really is not going to be an election that pivots on Afghanistan. The problem, though, is that he left that field totally to Barack Obama and the Democrats took all the credit that they wanted to and have basically taken that issue off the table for Republicans for the first time in decades. So, again, that, I think, was a big error on Romney's part, and the Democrats took full advantage of it. One note of caution here, we remember to 2008, John McCain came blazing out of his convention with a big bounce, was actually winning in September. So a lot of things can change. But if you are coming out of this convention and you're Barack Obama, you definitely feel very happy with the job that the Dems did for him.
Dana, let me go back to the foreign policy with you. Was it a big mistake, and was Mr. Romney's explanation today less than effective in explaining it?
Well, actually, worse than that, I think he made his problem a whole lot worse, because he could have said, well, I had a lot of other issues to talk about, but now saying that it's not important. Of course, we all understand what he means in a political sense. This isn't a foreign policy election, but I imagine for the thousands of Americans over there in harm's way in Afghanistan, they don't want to hear that what they're doing there is not important. Now, both sides have been neglecting a lot of the foreign policy, because that's not what people are focused on here. But I think that was a very legitimate line of attack that the president was able to deliver because of the absence of mentioning it.
Patricia Murphy, Dana Milbank, thank you both for your time tonight.
Thanks, Reverend.
Coming up, President Obama laced into Romney's record. But he wasn't the only one tossing a few zingers the governor's way. Plus, President Obama's fight for your voting rights took a big turn today. We'll tell you why Ohio's Secretary of State is folding.